My name is Patrick. I graduated OE in 2013, and I'm a proud alum of the program. I currently work at Carrabassett Valley Academy, where I'm a program director for the backcountry skiing program for high school kids. I have a couple kind of anecdotal stories that I'd like to share with you. And I'll start by saying that when I was 21 years old, I found myself in Lori's winter programming course. And that, for those of you who have been in that course, you kind of know what the scope of it is. But for 2 days of that, I found myself volunteering for an organization called Ski for Light, which is an adaptive program that works with visually impaired cross-country skiers in a variety of venues across New England. And as students in Lori's class, we were tasked with being kind of guides and leaders for, I'll call them clients, for the clients of Ski for Light. So for 2 days, I was partnered with a few different people, and the idea is that I would take the morning or the day and work with this person and guide them on ski trails. Now, some of these people were very talented skiers, and even though they had a visual impairment, they could ski on trails that were windy and steep and went through the trees. And there was the full range of the spectrum. So there were also people who were more novice, and they were on the flats and the track. I found myself with someone who was more advanced, for better or worse. And having been a downhill skier my entire life, the free heel concept was certainly a hurdle for me. But I had about 3 days on cross-country skis up until that point. So I was a novice myself, but moving quickly, and I actually learned a lot from this person. So the person I was working with was self-described as being 90% blind and could see light. So they could maybe see the light on the trail where the sun was reflecting off of the snow, and maybe see the dark areas where the trees were kind of lining the sides of the trail. So they had a little bit of that light perception. But it was very hard for me as a guide to understand what that's like. And we did some exercises where we would blindfold each other and ski with direction from another partner or another person. And I think even still, it's very hard to know what it's truly like to have a visual impairment. So it was a very eye-opening experience for me. I found myself at one point going down this pretty steep hill, and I got my tips crossed. I went down hard. And at first you're like, oh crap, like I'm falling, like it sucks already. But at the same time, I'm like thinking in that split second, I still have to guide this person down because gravity is still working on them too, right? They have to get to the bottom of the hill as well. And so I find myself rolling and sliding down the hill and still having to think about what the trail looks like in front of this person. And I really can't remember his name for the life of me, but I find myself saying, okay, slightly left, okay, straighten out, okay, bottom of the hill in 3, 2, 1, nice. And he made it down. And I regrouped, and I got down, and he said, you fell, didn't you? And I was like, yeah, how'd you know? And he was like, your voice just faded away as I kept going down the hill. I learned a lot from that experience, those 2 days working with that clientele. And I learned the obvious things it was a huge lesson in communication and trust and keeping a cool head under pressure. And then I have reflected on that experience over the years, multiple times. And the more I think about it, the more I realize the mastery of facilitation and the structure of the programming that Lori put together for that course to make something like that so profound for me. My next story is a little bit of a build on that experience for me. It represents my progression in kind of learning these skills and having those aha moments with communication and trust. For my outdoor ed internship in 2014, I moved out to Bozeman, Montana, and I worked for another adaptive skiing company called Eagle Mount. And they were similar, they had a similar mission, but they focused on downhill skiing, which was my forte. So I was really excited to work with that group. And it was a diverse clientele, so we worked with people of all abilities, both mental and physical. So one day I might have had someone who had cerebral palsy or Down syndrome, and the next day I might have been working with somebody who was paralyzed from the waist down, or somebody who was a war vet and lost a leg overseas. So I learned a lot from those folks as well. And the person that I remember most was this guy named David, and he was my favorite person to work with. Not only because he was a really high-level skier who skied in a sit ski because he was paralyzed from the waist down, but he put a smile on my face every single time I went out with him for 3 days after that. It was a super good partner to have while we were skiing. He was skiing pretty much the same kind of terrain that he was skiing before his accident. We were skiing couloirs, chutes, big open steep powder fields, and he was doing it in this bucket ski attached to mountain bike suspension on a downhill ski. And it was super inspiring to watch that. This one day we had together, everything was feeling just right. We had amazing conditions. We had been doing warm-up laps that for a lot of people wouldn't seem like warm-up laps on big, steep couloirs. And David turned to me and he said, I want to ski the big couloir. And the big couloir is a 1,300-foot couloir with a maximum pitch of 50 degrees. And it goes right down from the top of Lone Peak at Big Sky, all the way down to the tram house. It's huge, it's steep, and I thought if there was any day to do it, it was today. David was ready, he was psyched on it. So with the help of some ski patrollers, we got up to the top, and to be honest, I was shaking in my boots for David. I knew he was ready, but I had some reservations about it, and I wasn't gonna. It was his experience. It was his call, and I knew he was ready. But at the same time, I was nervous, and I took a second, and I literally thought to myself, what would Lori do right now? And just because of how you handle stress and the things that I've learned from you over the years in your programming. And so I found myself there, and I'm belaying him over the cornice into the meat of the run, and we're looking down this thing, and the walls rise up on both sides of you, and it's like you're riding, it's like the steepest tube you've ever seen that you're just gonna go down in. And Dave and I are standing there, and I thought, okay, let's just take this in, man. Like, this is an amazing place that we're in right now. And I found myself questioning kind of like that perception that when I was working with Ski for Light, it's so hard to know what those people are feeling in that moment, and how they're able to perceive the hill and turns and the change in snow conditions. And for me, it was kind of the same with David, working with David, because I had sat in a sit ski before, but I had no idea what it's like to not be able to use your abs and your leg muscles to be able to get your way down this pretty extreme terrain. So I just talked it through with him. We came up with a sequence, something that we both agreed on, and I gave him a fist bump and I let him rip it. And he sent it the whole way down. He had no issues. And it was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. And we met up at the bottom, and there's some hooting and hollering and excitement and celebrating. And that for me was a really strong progression from that from those 2 days in Ski for Light. Going from the skills I learned there in communication, trust, and keeping a cool head, to working with a similar clientele but different in even crazier terrain. David was the third person to ever ski Big Couloir on a monoski. So not only was it an amazing experience for me and him, but it was a historic moment, and I'm proud to be a part of it. Those two stories represent a progression for me that I've kind of identified in working with communication and trust and keeping a cool head, and that's developed over a lot of other stories, but I liked the pairing of these two stories. The continuation of my progression here is not fixed on those skills. I'm really lucky now that I work with a group of high school kids who are also high level, and I think that, you know, if I've taken anything away, it's the ability to learn from someone like Lori, who can put a progression like that together of programming, and and be an example of a mastery in facilitation, and try and pass that on. As hard as it is, it's been, learning from those experiences and trying to take away from how Lori taught that winter programming course, and how can I take that and pass it on to the group that I'm currently working with now. And that's the most inspiring part of my progression there as a skier and as a facilitator and an educator. And I know that in the future I'll be finding myself asking, what would Lori do, a few more times, and it always brings me back to some really good learning and to some really important things that I've taken away from my time at UNH. So thank you, Lori, for everything you do. Thanks, everybody.